Section 29, The French Revolution. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The French Revolution by Hilaire Bello. Section 29, Chapter 5 continued. The military aspect of the Revolution. Meanwhile, the news had come in that the last of the serious internal rebellions was crushed. Toulon had been recaptured, the English fleet driven out. The town, the harbour, and the arsenal had fallen into the hands of the French, largely through the science of a young major of artillery, not captain. I have discussed the point elsewhere. Bonaparte and this had taken place a week before the relief of Landau. The last confused horde of La Vendée had been driven from the walls of Granville in Normandy, to which it had erred and drifted rather than retreated. At Mans on the 13th of December it was cut to pieces, and at Savenay on the 23rd, 3 days before the great victory at Alsace, it was destroyed. A long peasant and bandit struggle, desperate, yet hardly to be called guerrilla, continued through the next year behind the hedges of Lower Brittany and of Vendée. But the danger to the state and to the Revolution was over. The year 1793 ended, therefore, with the complete relief of the whole territory of the Republic, save a narrow strip upon the Belgian frontier, complete domination of it by its Caesar, the Committee of Public Safety, with 2/3 of men under arms, and the future of the great experiment apparently secure. The causes of the wonder have been discussed, and will be discussed indefinitely. Primarily, they reside in the recreation of a strong central power, secondly, in the combination of vast numbers and of a reckless spirit of sacrifice. The losses on the national side were perpetually and heavily superior to those of the Allies. In Alsace they had been 3-1, and we shall better understand the duel when we appreciate that in the short 8 years between the opening of the war and the triumph of Napoleon at Marengo, there had fallen in killed and wounded on the French side over 700,000 men. 5. The story of 1794 is but the consequence of what we have just read. It was the little belt or patch upon the Belgian frontier that was still in the hands of the enemy that determined the nature of the campaign. It was not until spring that the issue was joined. The Emperor of Austria reached Brussels on the 2nd day of April, and a fortnight later reviewed his army. The French line, drawn up in opposition to it, suffered small but continual reverses until the close of the month. On the 29th, Clerfayt suffered a defeat which led to the fall, or rather the escape, of the small garrison of Menin. Clerfayt was beaten again at Courtenay a fortnight later, but all these early engagements in the campaign were of no decisive moment. Tourcoing was to be the first heavy blow that should begin to settle matters. Fleurus was to clinch them. No battle can be less satisfactorily described in a few lines than that of Tourcoing. So different did it appear to either combatant, so opposite are the plans of what was expected on either side and of what happened, so confused are the various accounts of contemporaries. The accusations of treason, which nearly always arise after a disaster, and especially a disaster overtaking an allied force, are particularly monstrous and may be dismissed. In particular, the childish legend which pretends that the Austrians desired an English defeat. What the French say is that excellent forced marching and scientific concentration permitted them to attack the enemy before the junction of his various forces was effected. What the Allies say is, if they are speaking for their centre, that it was shamefully abandoned and unsupported by the two wings. If they are speaking for the wings, that the centre had no business to advance when it saw that the two wings were not up in time to cooperate. One story goes that the Archduke Charles was incapacitated by a fit, Lord Acton has lent his considerable authority to this amusing version. At any rate, what happened was this. The Allies lay along the river Scheldt on Friday, the 16th of May. Tournay was their centre, with the Duke of York in command of the chief force there. 5 or 6 miles north down the river was one extremity of their line at a place called Warcoing. It was a body of Hanoverians. The left, under the Archduke Charles, was Austrian and had reached a place a day's march south of Tournay called Saint-Amand. Over against the Allies lay a large French force, also occupying a wide front over 15 miles, the centre of which was Tourcoing, then a village. Its right was in front of the fortress of Courtrai. Now, behind the French, up country, northward in the opposite direction from the lines of Allies on the Scheldt, was another force of the Allies under Clerfayt. The plan was that the Allied right should advance on to Mouscron and to take it. The Allied centre should advance on to Tourcoing and Mauveaux and take them, while the left should march across the upper waters of the river Marske, forcing the bridges that crossed that marshy stream and come up alongside the centre. In other words, there was to be an attack all along the French line from the south, and while it was proceeding, Clerfayt from the north of the French was to cross Lys and attack also. On the day of the 17th, what happened was this. The left of the Allies, marching from Saint-Amand, came up half a day late. The right of the Allies took Mouscron, but were beaten out of it by the French. The centre of the Allies fulfilled their programme, reaching Tourcoing and its neighbourhood by noon, and holding their positions. It is to the honour of English arms that this success was accomplished by a force, a third of which was British, and the most notable bayonet work in which was done by the Guards. Meanwhile, Clerfayt was late in moving and in crossing the river Lys, which lay between him and his objective. When night fell, therefore, on the first day of the action, a glance at the map will show that instead of one solid line advancing against the French from A to B, and the northern force in touch with it at C, the Allied formation was in an absurd projection in the middle, due to the success of the mixed and half-British force under the Duke of York, a success which had not been maintained on the two wings. A bulge of this sort in an attacking line is on the face of it disastrous. The enemy have only to be rapid in falling upon either flank of it, and the bulge can be burst in. The French were rapid, and burst in the bulge was. By concentrating their forces against this one central part of the Allies, they fought 3 to 1. That same capacity which at Wattignies had permitted them to scorn sleep and to be indefatigable in marching, put them on the road before 3 o'clock in the morning of Sunday the 18th, and with the dawn they fell upon the central forces of the Allies, attacking it from all 3 sides. It is on this account that the battle is called the Battle of Tourcoing, for Tourcoing was the most advanced point to which the centre of the Allies had reached. The Germans upon the Duke of York's right at Tourcoing felt the first brunt of the attack. The Duke of York himself, with his mixed half-British force, came in for the blow immediately afterwards, and while it was still early morning the Germans at Tourcoing began to fall back. The Duke of York's force to the left of them was left isolated. Its commander ought not to have hung on so long, but the defence was maintained with the utmost gallantry for the short time during which it was still possible. The retreat began about 9 in the morning, and was kept orderly for the first 2 miles, but after that point it was a rout. The drivers of the British cannon fled, and the guns left without teams blocked the precipitate flight of the cavalry. Their disorder communicated itself at once to the Guards and to the line. Even in this desperate strait some sort of order was restored, notably by the Guards Brigade, which were apparently the first to form, and a movement that could still be called a retreat was pursued towards the south. The Duke of York himself was chased from spinney to spinney, and escaped by a stroke of luck, finding a bridge across the last brook held by a detachment of Hessians. In this way were the central columns, who between them numbered not a third of the total force of the Allies, destroyed. Clerfayt had first advanced, but far too late to save the centre, and then retreated. The Archduke Charles, upon the left, was 4 hours late in marching to the help of the Duke of York. The right wing of the Allies was not even late. It spent the morning in an orderly artillery duel with the French force opposed to it. By 5 in the afternoon defeat was admitted and a general retreat of the Allies ordered. The end of section 29.